should be accountable or subject or pay tax to the federal government. It's like saying danfo operators using the federal roads, because there are some roads that are federal roads, should now be subject to Abuja in terms of their licensing, in terms of their operations. So that's another matter that we are fighting as a separate issue. Of course, as you indicated, the Federal High Court ruled against us on both grounds, and we are now in the Court of Appeal on that too. We think ultimately is a matter that has to be resolved by the Supreme Court, because we feel very strongly about the fact that you cannot regulate, in any federalism, you cannot regulate both operators from the federal government. No.
That would make some sense to me. Let me ask you very quickly about freedom of information. There have been some, I've read in the newspapers, and even I've had some solicitation from civil society concerning that issue. They're trying to draw the attention of this program to that issue. What's the Lagos State government's position on freedom of information?
Okay. Now there is a Freedom of Information Act, which is hard one. I know it's a federal law, and I know all the agitation and the efforts that went into getting it. But now we have that. The question is whether it also applies in the states. And of course, I will look in the Constitution to see the way in which the power over public information had been demarcated. And it's there clearly under the concurrent list. It says if it is public records of the Federation, then the National Assembly will make the law, which it has made in the Freedom of Information Act. Then it says if it's public records of the states, it's the State House of Assembly that, and to me that makes perfect sense, because as we administer the state, we generate information, some confidential, some not, and it will be odd indeed for a federal law to determine what will be confidential to the state government or not. That cannot happen in a federalism. And some people talk about covering the field. No, not here, because the field has been well demarcated. So we are insisting that Lagos State has the right to make its own public freedom of information law. And there is indeed a bill in the House already. But if we push all that aside, the question really at the end of the day is whether anyone needs information from Lagos State, which ought ordinarily to be made public, and is not getting it. And I believe the answer will be no. The one that has sparked this controversy was the World Bank loan for the ECO project. The reporting processes are very strict, and they must apply. If you must begin to draw down, you must continue to draw down the loan. Even there are publication requirements, and we have indeed published in the newspapers how this money was being spent. This is simply not money that could be taken and spent in a way not contemplated by the contract. And the way it's even being spent can be seen all over the place, because this is money going directly to schools to enable them run things which were hampering their operations. So, and again, World Bank has its own policy, open. So you can even go to the World Bank and access the manner in which, the purpose for which the loans were being given, the manner in which they were being spent, everything is open. So it's a wrong candidate for this controversy, really.
Excellent. Let's take a short time out. I'm enjoying this conversation with Mr. Ade, Attorney General of Lagos State. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. It's my final segment with Mr. Ade, Honorable Attorney General of Lagos State. We've looked at this judiciary judgments relating to inland waterways, to toll gates, to hotels. Now we'll talk about VAT, the value-added tax, in which again there's some legal controversy between the Lagos State government and the federal government. And I think there was an adverse judgment against you in relation to that.
Yes. We have had this controversy for quite a while. Actually since 1999.
Yes.
Because the value-added tax decree, as it was then, was promulgated during the military era. at that time the federal military government could make laws on any subject whatsoever. But by the time we transited to constitutional rule, it became important to review it again, because consumption tax, sales tax, value-added tax, whatever you choose to call it, had never in Nigeria been one of those taxes reserved for federal jurisdiction. Okay, so we had challenged it informally, officially, and but eventually we got to court. And when we got to court in 2008, all the states were involved, and some took a position, some were against, and everything. And that's how it was. But
you would have a greater stake in VAT than many states.
Yeah.
Because you are a net contributor.
Yeah, definitely.
So if somebody gets more than he would otherwise get, if it was a state law, he probably would not be on your side.
Of course. Okay. And really, I think it boiled down to that when the agreements were submitted. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. So it wasn't a case of a decision against or for. And it made some interesting pronouncements regarding the interpretation of the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. I think section 231.
Okay, the Supreme Court said we don't have original
jurisdiction. Yes, that we only have original jurisdiction in a matter between the federation and a state. And this is a matter between a state and the federal government. That distinction, I've been reflecting over it. It does change the law as we know it, because we've had several disputes straightforward between state and federal government. The one about hotel that we talked about is one of those, and the Supreme Court heard it. But this time it said that it wouldn't. And it also interpreted section 251, which gave jurisdiction to the federal court, and suggested that a case, because this was revenue of the federal government, ought to have gone to federal court. Again, we don't think it was revenue of the federal government. That begged the issue. That was why we were in court anyway. But be that as it may, that is the final court. We can only criticize for academic reasons. The long and short of it is that the court said it did not have jurisdiction to take that case. So we are back exactly where we were.
And do you intend to pursue that case now through the Federal High Court?
For now, no. That decision hasn't been made.
Interesting. All of these matters we have discussed show the tensions between. It highlights the issues around federalism.
Yes.
Devolution of powers. Yeah. How do you reflect on all this? What would you like to see going forward? What implications do all of these arguments have for? The
kind of tension we see here, take gambling, lotteries, another issue that's between us. Now, someone will go to Abuja, get a federal lottery license, but he won't go to other states. He will come to Lagos. I'll go to Rivers. So really, you will see that some states have more at stake in trying to redress these issues. But as you have said, federalism, that is it. In the US, that is what goes on. The powers have to be interpreted regularly because there are always areas of overlap or apparent overlap, which is up to the judiciary to correct. So we have the faith that ultimately the judiciary would resolve all of these matters. And it is if at the end they are unable to resolve it in a manner that satisfies everyone, then we talk of review of the Constitution itself in order to make things clearer. But I think the principles are fairly well settled. Local matters should be left to. So both operators in Lagos, what's going on within Lagos, not interstate or international, should be Lagos affair.
Interesting, exciting, interesting, controversial, but probably part of the building blocks of building a stronger union.
Yeah.
Mr. Akpaye, thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back. As you can see, I very much enjoyed the conversation with Mr. Akpaye, and I hope you did too. But beyond enjoying it, it was a highly illuminating discussion around the issues, the tensions between federal and state powers within the 1999 Constitution. My take is this: you are either a federation or you are not. There's a logic to federalism, and like my guest stated, that logic is that powers should reside where they are best used. So local issues should reside with local power, with the local tier of government. But that is why we have a judiciary, and that is why the rule of law allows us to test all of these controversies through the judicial system. And where the judiciary does not resolve the issue, then the political process will address them. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.